Surface Duo. Has there been a more divisive device released in recent memory? If there has been, it's difficult for me to think of one. Is it a buggy mess that's not ready for prime time? Is it the future of mobile computing? Is it a middle step somewhere between slab phones and folding phones like the Z Fold 2, destined to be passed by? Let's find out. Parts of this video were filmed on different days as I slowly formulated my thoughts on the Surface Duo. So if I magically change clothes or things changed a little bit from shot to shot, don't worry, you're not going crazy. So let's do an overview here of the hardware first on Microsoft's Surface Duo. I think that the hardware is easily the show-stopping sort of thing about this device. The hardware is what makes it what it is. So Surface Duo is actually going to be vertically shorter than a lot of mainstream flagship devices, but it is going to be wider than any of them. I think a really good phone to compare it to size-wise is actually the Pixel 3, because it is almost the exact same height. But you can see there, Pixel 3 is a whole heck of a lot more narrow than Surface Duo. This thing feels incredibly premium. You're looking at glass on glass on glass on glass on metal. I mean, it is made of the highest grade materials on the market. The hinge is made of metal, and the hinge is, look, everyone has already said it, it's incredible. Just the overall thinness of this device is incredible. If you want to get a good idea of how thin this thing is, you can see there it is not much thicker than a USB-C port when unfolded. And when you unfold it, just look at that. It is absolutely incredibly thin. The Pixel 3 is not a large phone at all. And you can see there, as far as thickness goes, the Pixel 3 is still quite a bit thicker. So once it's open, that's where you get to what makes this thing such a weird device. You have two screens. Now each screen is a 4:3 aspect ratio, which combine for one 3:2 aspect ratio area. That is what makes it Surface Duo. You're supposed to be multitasking with this thing. The only camera is right up here up front next to this LED flash, which I would honestly have been fine if they just didn't even include the LED flash. The camera, as you can see, faces inward, so when you want to take a picture facing yourself, you can fold this thing all the way around 360 degrees, face the camera toward yourself, take your picture. If you want to take a picture facing out, well, guess what? You just flip it around and now use the other screen and you take your picture facing that way. On the side of the device, you have a fingerprint scanner, power button, and then your volume rockers. And that's it. That is the only thing on this thing. It is pristine. It is flat. It is smooth. It is almost slippery at times. The buttons are nice and clicky. The hinge does feel as good as everyone says that it does. It's one of these things that it can stop at any particular angle with no problem at all. Set it up in tint mode to watch a video, set it up in compose mode and use one whole screen as a keyboard. It's not going to go anywhere. It's smooth, but it requires some effort to push. So let's talk about what happens when you actually unlock the Surface Duo and begin to use the thing. This is my home screen. If you swipe over to your left, you're going to get this feed view, which can be either a list of your own personal widgets, or what I like to use is a news feed. That's also quite useful as well. Of course, this news feed can be customized, and you'll notice that when I select on news, it's going to open it up on the other screen. Now I can go in and select my news interests and do what I want to do there, and then as I back out, that's what will happen. If you swipe up, you're going to get your list of apps. Obviously, you can pull down your notification shade from either side. Does not matter. One pull, two. A really cool feature that they have here is called app groups. It takes advantage of the fact that you have two screens. I'm kind of a weather nerd, so I like to use a radar app called Radar Scope. But I also use My Radar as another app because My Radar gives you the full country, whereas Radar Scope lets you dial in and get much more specific. So as you can see here on my left screen, I have a app group called Weather. When I select it, it's going to open up both apps simultaneously, which is going to let me, let's say I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to say, look over here next to Kansas City. Looks like there's maybe something going on there. Then I can go over here, look for the nearest radar station, and then get a really nice, precise view of those storms. I've got another one set up where I'm looking at news. I've got Reddit and Microsoft News. Boom. Opening them up both simultaneously. How about Facebook and Instagram? And all you have to do if you want to make one of these things is you simply just long press on any app, hit groups, pick another group, and then you'll name it. It'll throw it on your desktop. And that's it. You can go in and you can actually edit the app groups and tell it which screen you want each app to occupy. And that works really, really well. And I think that these are the times when Surface Duo feels great and when it does what it's supposed to do. Now, by default, it does use gesture navigation. As you can see down here at the bottom, I actually have a back and a multitasking button, an app switching button, because the gesture navigation, which I've been used to using for years now, just doesn't work well right now. So I've replaced it with just pressing that line. Now it takes you home. That line does still work for one really important gesture, however. So let's open up Twitter. Now let's say I want to move this app from one screen to the other. I simply touch that line down there at the bottom, and now I can drag it over to the other screen and let go. Drag it back over and let go. Now let's say this is an app. Let me pick an app that actually works well for this. Let's use Microsoft News because it works really well for this. Let's say you want to actually have one app using both screens. Well, you can do that. You can drag up to the middle. You see when it triggers the spanning, let go, and boom. Now this app will actually use both screens simultaneously. So I can go over here, pick a category, pick a news story, and it'll load on the second screen. That's pretty cool. Now what happens if you use an app that doesn't span correctly? Because this is something that has to be turned on, has to be enabled or taken advantage of. Let's say you go back to Twitter. Let's put Twitter in spanning mode. Well, guess what? Now you're just going to have a really big Twitter. And now on what you're seeing, you're just seeing a really wide screen. And that looks really good, right? Well, the problem here is that what I'm getting actually looks like this. You got to remember, there's a big old hinge right down the middle. So not all apps are going to be as good as others at spanning. Now, is there a use case for still spanning apps that don't support it correctly? I think so. And I'll give you a good example. Let's go back to Twitter. Let's go back and span it. But now let's rotate this guy vertically. Well, now what you have is not nearly as bad. That's pretty usable, actually. For whatever reason, that way is bad. That way, not nearly as bad. What about some other ways, some other things that might actually take advantage of spanning in a non-native, but it still works way? Because I think people have this idea that if an app doesn't directly support spanning, it's just garbage and you're never going to want to use it that way. Well, some apps are not bad span. This is just the search feed on Instagram. Is it, as great as having an uninterrupted screen that size? No, I'm not gonna sit here and make that claim that it's, this is just as good as what the Galaxy Fold is doing or whatever. But in a pinch, is it usable if you want to get a closer look at something? Yeah, I think so. Another app I've actually used in that spanned mode is Nest. This is just a look at my front step there, my front lawn, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And those are not my cats, by the way. I do not own cats, but there they are. And from this way, you can scroll through your timeline and get a really big view of the camera up on the top. That's totally usable. And if you do go the other way, yeah, you've got a big bar down the middle, but if you're looking at a detail that doesn't happen to be directly in the center, you do have a bigger screen. Is it perfect? No. Does it work? Yeah, it does. And of course, there are more apps that do work. Their camera app actually does natively support it as well, where you've got your camera, your viewfinder on one side, and then the pictures you've just taken pop up on the other side. Outlook supports it. There are several apps that do support it. Kindle is one that people have mentioned that they wanted to see how that works. I'm more of an audiobook person because I, as you can tell, as someone that bought the Surface Duo, am a big multitasker. I am a habitual, uncontrollable multitasker. So I like to audiobook more than regular book. But there you go. There you've got, you've got a book. You're in book mode and you got a book. How cool is that? If you're a big reader, pretty good way to go. A lot of people have asked about something like YouTube. Well, let's see what happens when you span YouTube. Well, look, you get big YouTube with a big old thing right down the middle. Let's go into a video. Looks like the average sniper has something going. You're going to get the tablet view of YouTube with a big seam right down the middle. Okay, not great. However, if you hold it vertically, well, now in this instance, I've got a live stream up top and a really big comment section down the rest of the way. I think that's actually totally usable. And of course, you can have YouTube running over here, Reddit running over here, be doing whatever you want to do, multitasking like a boss. Let's say you want to put YouTube over there. Great, you can just toss it over there, no problem at all. No lag, no stutter, no problem. Let's open Reddit back up over on this side. It just works. I think that the thing that has frustrated me the most with this has been the camera, both in its performance, which is pretty lackluster, but also just in the way that it operates. So if I want to open up the camera, I will select the camera. It's going to launch on that side. That's the side that the icon was on whenever I selected it. Well, now I'm in selfie mode, right? So if I want to take a selfie, that's great. I can hit the shutter button and there it is. You can actually go ahead and close the thing all the way around, which you can do at any point. But now what happens if you want to take a picture facing outwards? Well, you need to rotate the thing around. And that time that actually worked totally fine. Now I am facing forward and that's working just fine. The problem I have is that movement is inconsistent. Sometimes when you open up that camera and you go to flip it around, what winds up happening, see, you see now I've switched to portrait because I accidentally touched the screen as I was flipping it around. It's irritating. Is it the end of the world? No, it's not the end of the world. What I have discovered is the best way to do it is to just flip things around. I'm used to just opening my camera when I want to use my camera. What you need to do is you need to open your camera. Now, if you're going to take an outward-facing photo, you need to go ahead and move this over to that side, right? Then close the other screen around, and you're okay. You want to have the camera app on the appropriate screen before you close it up. So let's talk about this guy in phone mode, because it's not something that a lot of people are talking about. In just straight up phone mode, what you have at that point is just a really, really wide phone. And it's something that I talked about in a separate video. You can actually go into the developer settings and change the DPI and make it so that you're going to start getting the tablet version of many apps. See, I'm getting the tablet version of YouTube because it's a wide enough screen that makes sense. Out of the box, it doesn't do that. But like I said, there's a video I've got about how to change the DPI in developer settings to get this much more optimized view. So what's been my experience using it in phone mode as a really wide, somewhat short phone? Overall, I find it to be totally fine. Probably the best thing about using it in phone mode with a screen this wide is simply just having a huge, wide keyboard to type on. I've always been a swipe typer for the last many, many years. But with a keyboard this large, typing is really fast and easy to use both thumbs. Let's talk about compose mode. So compose mode is when you have it fully opened and then you rotate it vertically. So now let's say I'm going to type something. Well, now I have an entire bottom screen as the keyboard. You can even set it up like a little laptop if you wanted to sit here and type like this, which, you know, look, I guess you could probably get good at that. I actually, you know, I've tried using it with my thumbs and it's okay. But honestly, if I'm going to sit there and type something long, I'm probably just going to flip it around and use it like in phone mode. Something else I do want to mention that I've been pleasantly surprised with is how good, and this is going to sound silly, but voice to text is working really well. My OnePlus 7 Pro was really bad about that. It would screw stuff up. It would stop listening halfway through what I was saying. I like using speech to text because, look, typing on a glass screen is just not accurate. It's not accurate for me anyways. I'm bad at it. I've always been bad at it. So if I can just say the words I want to say and it pulls it in and does it correctly, that's awesome. And Swift keyboard is what this thing uses, and it works really, really well. So now that we've got my really, really long overview out of the way, let's talk about the bad stuff first. And I think we have to address the elephant in the room, and that is bugs. So we have to remember what Microsoft and Google are doing here is taking an OS like Android that was never meant to do the things that Surface Duo does and then trying to make that work. Now, largely, as you've seen in a lot of those clips there, it does work, but there are some hiccups here and there. So quickly, I just want to throw out some of the bugs I have experienced. So when you are using just the gesture navigation, the bar down here at the bottom is all you have. And when you want to go home, you swipe up on that. The problem with that is you have to swipe perfectly straight up. And if you swipe too far, you just get that happening. And if you swipe off axis, you wind up just throwing the app onto the other screen. That's not necessarily a bug outright, but it's frustrating and it makes things feel glitchy. You're trying to go home and you're just sort of tossing your app back and forth, and it gets frustrating. Obviously, a really simple way to address this is to not use the gesture controls. Now when I want to go home, I just touch the line and it's over because I've disabled the gesture controls and now I'm using the 3 buttons down there at the bottom. Obviously, you can still use that line to move your apps back and forth, and that works totally fine. Now that you're not going to confuse the system with what motion is intentionally me moving the app around and what motion is me trying to throw it away and to dismiss it. I've had an issue where my wallpaper would just be black. I would lock it, unlock it, boom, the wallpaper's back. That's a little bit strange and annoying. When you're using this guy in phone mode, what is supposed to happen is the shelf, all the icons will flow over to the screen that you're on, obviously. And if you switch screens, they'll flow back over onto this side. I had an issue a couple times where you would be in this phone mode and all the icons would, I guess, be on the other screen that's not turned on. So you just have an empty shelf down there at the bottom. So these icons were Edge and Spotify are, it would just be blank. Now that, I would just open it up and then close it back again and it would fix itself. Here's a fun one. On Twitter, you'll notice that the navigation buttons down there are black. They should be white. If you're using Twitter in dark mode, which I am, you need to make sure that you're not on blackout mode. Let's see if I go to dark mode. Lights out is what it's called. Now you just can't see your navigation keys. They are there, but you can't see them, so I have to leave it on dim. I don't know if that's a system problem or if that's a Twitter problem. I've also had incidences where when you're using this phone and you open it up a little bit, you get what's called peek mode, which looks like that. It just gives you a little peek of your notifications and so forth. I've had it before where I'm fully opened, I'm hitting the unlock, and it's staying in peek mode. Rather than going to your lock screen, it just was stuck in peek mode. I would have to close it, open back up again, thumbprint, and now I'm into the phone. Now, do I consider any of this stuff to be absolutely like show-stopping. You can't use the phone. You know, it's broken. No, I really don't. Most of this stuff is really not a big deal at all. People are really blowing this out of proportion. Maybe before this last update that came out day one, maybe things were much worse. This doesn't seem that bad. Now, don't misunderstand me here. If this were happening on any other device, or just a regular device, I would probably be there with a lot of these people being really negative about this because it would be unacceptable on a normal device. I'd be ready to call this thing half-baked and not ready for prime time. That said, Surface Duo is not like any device you've ever used, and most of the time, I'd say the vast majority of the time, it operates exactly as I expect it to. Let's talk about why these bugs are happening really fast, because I think it's important. Let's rule out the hypothesis, number one, that this thing isn't powerful enough to run Android correctly. That's simply not true. I can emulate a GameCube game while I'm watching a YouTube video on the top screen. The Snapdragon 855 is more than powerful enough to run Android. The hardware is not the problem. What's happening here is all due to how different this form factor is when compared to what Android is meant for. The amount of fundamental tweaks that need to happen to keep Android in a familiar state, but still accommodate having two screens and then both screens working in tandem together is almost overwhelming. The good news is that I feel like the customizations that they've done have been really light. They've kept it as clean as possible, and that route of just customizing Android is the right approach. All the apps in the App Store are why we're on Android and we're not running Windows RT or something horrible like that. Android is what it needed to be. I would not have bought this if it wasn't running Android. Windows Phone died because no apps. And here's the great news. Every app I have downloaded from the Play Store has worked totally fine. I can spam them, I can move them, I can open, close, they perform fine. The glitches are not that bad. The glitches are in sort of navigating the UI in certain very specific instances. I don't want to make it sound like there are no bugs, because there are weird glitches. But do any of them absolutely break the phone? No, they don't. Do I think they can be fixed relatively quickly? Yeah, I think it's entirely possible that these things can get squashed. Are they annoying? Absolutely. But you can't forget this phone is a one-of-a-kind brand new device. It's a brand new kind of device. This is going to be expected. If you're an early adopter, you're not surprised by any of this. This is what an early adopter expects to happen. So let's be more specific on things that aren't bugs, but I still think are bad about the phone. The speaker is really bad. It's extremely quiet, and when you crank the volume up to full blast, which is still quieter, it's like half volume on my OnePlus 7 Pro, it starts to get distorted sounding. And actually, right on cue here is the black wallpaper glitch. This wasn't happening on the default wallpapers that this thing came with, but my wallpaper does. Now it's back. All I needed to do was close it, open it back up, and it's back. That may have actually been to do with me being casting to your phone, because I actually needed to disconnect from your phone for the wallpaper to come back. Just weird stuff like that. Could you still use your phone while your wallpaper's black? Yeah, did it take 3 seconds for me to close it and open it back up? Yeah. Anyways, back to the speaker. It distorts at high volumes, and the volumes are not high enough. It's just not a good speaker. The good news is that a lot of us have a set of Bluetooth earbuds in their pocket at most times. I've been using Bluetooth earbuds almost exclusively for like 4 years now. Even if I'm just around the house and I'm playing a video, I'll pop one earbud in, because that's better for me than just blasting my sound out into the world. So I'm not really bothered by the speaker being bad, but you might be. Speaking of accessories you're going to want to have, a smartwatch is going to be really, really important. There's no outer screen here, so when you get a notification, you're going to have to actually open the device up and check to see what it is. That might get annoying for some people. Look at my smartwatch, see what it is, roll on. Now look, we've already mentioned 2 things you're going to want to buy in addition to having this $1,400 device. That can be a problem for some people. A lot of people already have these things. And look, you can go get a little Fitbit for like 40 or 50 bucks now and get your notifications on that. That's not too big of a deal, but it is definitely something to consider. You're going to need both of those things to really be able to enjoy this thing at its fullest. Whether you like it or not, you're going to be stuck with Microsoft's launcher. This thing is too weird for a regular launcher to just work correctly. It's too heavily customized. To further add some irritation, some of the features that MS Launcher has on other devices, you don't get on this thing yet. Like, you can't change your icons, you can't customize the rows. That's annoying. It's got to happen. It's got to be coming. But right now, you actually get a lesser customized version than other people will get. I've mentioned the camera. There's a whole video about it, and we're going to be covering that as it progresses. But the camera is bad. In the best of light, the pictures are passable. In anything worse than that, they're muddy and noisy. Check out that video. More coverage about that. Okay, so we're 25 minutes in, and all I've done is give you an overview and talk about the glitches and the things that are bad. Let's talk about the things that are good, because while it's probably a shorter list, it's a more significant list for me. So the vast majority of the time, this thing feels like such a different sort of device that it's actually really hard for me to even compare it to a phone. I mean, yeah, you can open it up and take a phone call on it, so I guess it's technically a phone. But it's really not, though. When I've got something like a video processing on one screen and I'm making the thumbnail for a YouTube video on the other, that's honestly just wild to me. Taking notes on a podcast I'm consulting on with the show playing on the other screen, doing some light gaming while YouTube's playing on the other screen. Hell, doing anything while a video is playing is badass. You can watch Netflix, Hulu, whatever, and be doing something else on the other screen. That is still not stopped making me happy. You're going to be pleased with how well this thing performs while doing these sorts of things. It doesn't stutter, it doesn't lag, it doesn't hiccup. The Snapdragon 855 just plows through these kinds of workloads without missing a beat. Now, since there are two screens, the two screens need to be really great, and luckily they're really good. There's no appreciable difference between the two screens in terms of the color tone, the brightness, anything like that. And honestly, I've kind of been really surprised that I've not really missed the 90 hertz refresh rate that I'm coming from. It hasn't really bothered me at all. I've used this device outside, going for a walk around the neighborhood, going to the park, sitting out in my backyard. It's bright enough to get by outside in pretty direct sunlight as well. Like I said earlier, typing on these big screens is really nice. Having that wider aspect ratio makes typing kind of a joy. It's weird for me to say that when you couple it with the haptics, which the vibration motor is very good in this phone, it feels very nice. With that width and the haptics, I might actually enjoy typing on this thing as much as I did on my BlackBerry Key 1. Now, like I said, I don't really use compose mode very often, but if you've got bigger hands, I'm not a big-handed individual, you may find compose mode to be really, really useful. Battery life has been really surprising for me. I didn't think it was going to be horrible, but I thought it would probably struggle to get me through a day. Right now it is 4:37 p.m. It's been off the charger since 8 o'clock. I am at 63% battery now. This has not been a heavy day worth of use for me. But I've used the phone, like it's been being used. I've done some texting, I've done some browsing Reddit, I've watched a YouTube video or two. 63% is rocks. I've watched a YouTube video or two, and 63%, I'm going to make it till bedtime, no problem at all. We could make a list of things that other phones will do better than the Surface Duo. However, there's one thing that the Surface Duo does better than any phone that's ever existed, and that is multitasking. The other day, I was going to make a thumbnail on here because I couldn't get to my computer and I needed to do it on my Surface Duo. I opened up OneDrive on one screen to download some of my presets, some of my assets. On the other screen, I've got Pixlr, which is what I use to make thumbnails on the go. So I'm pulling assets, throwing them over to Pixlr, doing my thing. I've got a wider screen that makes photo editing really nice. And I'm just sitting there doing this thinking, this is so much better than doing it on my OnePlus 7 Pro, where I'm having to switch apps back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is just better at that, and it's not even remotely close. What phone looks like this? And what phone lets you do two things at a time the way that this phone does? What phone encourages you to be more productive and actually enables you and helps you to do that better than this phone? I'm waiting for the answer there because I don't think it exists. And look, I get that you can split screen view on a tablet and so forth, but I've said it once, I'll say it again. 2 screens is better than 1 partitioned screen when it comes to multitasking. There's a reason I use dual monitors. As someone who is a big OneNote user, having the ability to open up my notes, these are my notes for this video, being able to do something like spam them to see my other notes side by side there, and then being able to come over here and jot down a quick note with this pen, use the eraser even, that works totally fine. Man, I'm just here to tell you, you can think what you want to think about it, and ultimately, if you hear this stuff and you don't care, then this is very clearly not the device for you. But there is a subset of people who will find this phone infinitely more useful than a traditional phone. The bugs are not show-stopping. There are people on the internet, look, let's just be real for a second, all right? Hot takes are often stupid takes. These people out there that wanted to hate this thing from the drop, talking about glitches and bugs on a device that they've never even put their hands on, talking about how it's broken, you can't use it, it's unusable. Look, I've had it since day one. It has never crashed completely out. I've never encountered a glitch that prevented me from getting something done. They are annoying, minor hiccups, bumps in the road that are going to get ironed out. I'm rather confident in this. I actually think that Android 11 might make a really big difference for this thing. Now, we're to the big question though. Should you buy this thing at $1,400? And that's a question I can't answer. I'm not sure it's worth it for me, and I really liked it so far. That's a lot of money. If you're an early adopter, you're used to paying probably too much for something, and $1,400 is probably not worth it. But if you want to be the first, if you want to be the only person on your block with this thing, if you want to be part of the community, finding out tips, tricks, you're on the bleeding edge of something, this is the only thing in town that's going to feel like that to you. Most people, should you buy this? No, you probably really shouldn't. You should wait 6 months, see if the price goes down, see what happens with updates, and go from there. But look, you know who you are. Some of us can't help it but to buy something like this. In a world where every phone is the same, and the most different phones around are just phones that turn into bigger phones, what an incredible device. What an incredible concept. I believe in this concept. I believe in this concept even more than I believe in this particular phone. And I think that this device itself is actually very good, and I think it's going to be great by the time it's done. The concept, I'm sold on. This is one of those paradigm shifting devices that for me, my wife handed me her Xiaomi Mi 9T Pro earlier today to look at something, and it just felt weird to me. I needed to actually jump to her Notes app to copy something to send it to me, and swiping up and holding, going to the Notes app, copying, swiping up and holding, going back to the messaging app, paste, send. It felt clumsy, it felt awkward, and it felt objectively worse than the same experience would have been on the Surface Duo. Guys, I don't have a lot more to say. This video is probably going to be really, really long, but hey, I'll probably have the most in-depth and thorough review on the Surface Duo on YouTube. So if you like that, hit that like button. Please do hit the subscribe button. If there's something you want to see me test, drop it down into the comments, and it'll probably make it into a separate video. Hell, maybe I'll do a live stream or something and just test stuff on the fly for people. Stay tuned for what will certainly be like a year worth of Surface Duo videos as more things come out. I'm excited about this device. I'm excited that you guys seem to be excited about this device. So like I said, hit that sub button, and until the next video, stay nerdy, my friends. If you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a Scary If Literal member. You'll get access to a whole bunch of emoticons to use with live streams and a shout out on an upcoming video. Thanks as always for your continued support.